Have you ever noticed how you're always the backup? Not the person someone calls first, but the one they call when their first plan falls through. Not the one people choose, but the one they settle for. And the worst part is, nobody ever says it out loud. It's just in the way they hesitate before picking you, the way you're included, but never prioritized, the way you can feel it without anyone admitting it. And if you've felt this more than once, it stops feeling like coincidence. It starts feeling like identity. But here's what nobody tells you. There's a very specific psychology behind people who were never anyone's first choice, and by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why you are the way you are. You can sit in a room full of people, laughing at the right moments, saying the right things, and still feel like you don't fully belong there. Like you're participating, but not chosen. And maybe you've had those moments where someone cancels on you, and it doesn't even surprise you anymore. That quiet, almost numb thought, yeah. I figured. You don't make a scene. You don't ask for explanations. You just adjust. Because at some point, you stopped expecting to be first. And if you're being honest, there's a part of you that's always scanning, reading people, noticing the slight changes in tone, the delayed replies, the subtle distance. And nobody sees that part of you, but it's always on. And that's where this really begins. Back in the 1950s, psychologist Harry Harlow did an experiment that most people don't fully understand the emotional impact of. He took baby monkeys and gave them two mothers. One was made of wire and provided food. The other was soft, warm, but gave nothing. Logically, you'd think they'd choose the one that feeds them. But they didn't. They clung to the soft one. Comfort over necessity. Connection over logic. And here's why that matters. When someone grows up feeling like they're not the first emotional choice, not the one people instinctively reach for, their brain adapts. It starts to believe, connection isn't something I'm given, it's something I have to earn. And that belief doesn't just stay in childhood. It follows you into friendships, relationships, every room you walk into. But that's just the surface. Because the way your mind adapts to that feeling, is where things get really interesting. When you're not someone's first choice, your brain starts developing something called hypervigilance. It's basically your nervous system staying on alert, constantly scanning for emotional signals. You notice everything. The pause before someone replies. The shift in someone's energy. The difference between how they treat you, and how they treat someone else. Most people move through social situations casually. But you read between the lines, even when there's nothing written. And here's the thing, this isn't overthinking. It's adaptation. Your brain learned early on that attention isn't guaranteed, so it started tracking it. And if you've ever caught something about someone's mood before they even said a word, you know exactly what this feels like. But that awareness comes at a cost. When you're used to being second, or third, or optional, you stop asking for things. Not because you don't need them, but because you don't expect them to be met. Psychologists call this part of attachment theory. If your early experiences taught you that attention is inconsistent, you adapt by becoming low maintenance. You tell yourself you're easygoing. That you don't need much. But the truth is, you've just learned how to need less out loud. And maybe you've done this. You wanted to text someone, but didn't. You needed reassurance, but stayed quiet. Not because the need wasn't there. But because asking felt like risking rejection. And that silence builds over time. Here's something uncomfortable, but true. When someone finally chooses you, even a little, it hits harder than it should. Because it's rare. So your brain assigns it more value than it deserves. This connects to something called rejection sensitivity. When you've experienced repeated emotional, second place, your mind becomes highly reactive to both rejection and acceptance. So when someone gives you attention, consistency, or warmth, it doesn't feel normal. It feels significant. And that's where things get tricky. Because sometimes, you don't fall for the person. You fall for the feeling of being chosen. And those are not the same thing. But most people never realize that difference. Most people lean on others for emotional support. But people like you, learn to handle things alone. Not because you prefer it. Because you had to. You became your own backup plan. You learned how to sit with your feelings, process them, and move on without external validation. And on the surface, that looks like strength. And it is, to a point. But it also means there are parts of you that nobody has ever really seen. Because you stopped expecting anyone to stay long enough to understand them. And if someone asked you how you're doing, you'd probably say, "I'm fine," not because it's true, but because explaining feels pointless. But here's where it gets deeper than personality. This isn't just emotional. It's neurological. When you repeatedly experience social or emotional rejection, your brain starts prioritizing safety over connection. The amygdala, the part responsible for threat detection, becomes more sensitive. So instead of thinking, "This person might like me," your brain leans toward, "This might not last." It's subtle, but it changes everything. Because now, even when something good is happening, there's a part of you waiting for it to disappear. And maybe you've done this. Things are going well with someone, and instead of enjoying it, you start preparing for the moment it ends. That's not negativity. That's conditioning. But here's the strange part. This same wiring gives you something most people don't have. Most people interact on the surface. They take words at face value. They believe what's presented. But people who were never the first choice, they look deeper. You notice inconsistencies. You pick up on emotional undercurrents. You see intentions, not just actions. It's why you can walk away from someone and think, something felt off, even if everything looked fine. And the wild part is, you're usually right. Because when you've spent your life trying to understand where you stand, you get very good at reading where everyone else stands too. But there's a downside to seeing this clearly. Even when you are. Even when someone shows up consistently, chooses you openly, prioritizes you, there's still that quiet voice in the back of your mind. Yeah, but for how long? This is the long-term effect of something called learned expectation. Your brain isn't reacting to the present. It's predicting based on the past. So even genuine connection can feel temporary. And that creates a strange dynamic. Most people fear losing someone. But people like you almost expect it. So instead of fully stepping in, you stay slightly guarded. Not closed off, just, not fully there. And that distance, it protects you. But it also keeps something out. And this is where everything flips. Here's what most people get wrong about this. They think being not the first choice makes you less valuable. But psychologically, it often creates depth that can't be taught. Because while most people learned connection from being chosen, you learned it from observing, adapting, and understanding. Research in social psychology suggests that people who experience early social inconsistency often develop higher emotional intelligence over time. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind. The kind that reads people accurately, understands dynamics, and doesn't get easily fooled. So what felt like exclusion? Quietly trained perception. And that doesn't make you broken. It makes you precise. But precision comes with weight. If you've spent most of your life feeling like the backup, like the optional one, like the person people care about, just not first, that does something to you. It makes you quieter in your needs, sharper in your awareness, and slower to trust what feels good. And yeah, that can feel isolating. But it also means something most people never realize. You don't just experience people. You understand them. And that's rare. So maybe the goal isn't to force yourself into being someone's first choice overnight. Maybe it's to recognize that the way you see the world, the way you read people, the way you feel things deeply but quietly, that's not something to erase. It's something to be careful with. Because not everyone deserves access to that level of understanding. If this felt a little too accurate, like it was describing things you've never really put into words, then this channel is for you. Not surface-level advice. Not generic motivation. Just real psychology, explained in a way that actually makes sense of your life. So if you're someone who notices more, feels more, and thinks a little deeper than most people around you, subscribe. Because the more you understand how your mind works, the less confusing everything starts to feel. And maybe, for once, things will start making sense.